Hello and welcome. Today we will talk about Chapter 9, Managing for Diversity in Public Organizations. So in this chapter, the concepts of diversity are more relevant both to private sector as well as public sector institutions. So managing for diversity in public agencies requires us to think about how our local, our state, and our federal level leaders are taking advantage of this diversity and integrating new generations and new immigrants to the country as part of their workforce. As you know, public sector organizations serve many consumers, and most often, some public agencies are staffed with very, very diverse workers of different age groups. Yet, these public sector organizations in the American workplace seems to be facing a very dramatic number of retirements over the next 20 to 30 years. As a matter of fact, it's estimated that nearly 3/4 of the federal government's top executives are leaving or are now eligible to retire. I know some of us probably have parents and grandparents that have been part of this transition. Given these projections, the question is how ready is government at all levels to replace this vast number of talented and skilled employees that will be leaving in the public sector over the coming years and decades. So the public sector is faced with another challenge as well that arises from the number of migrants or immigrants that will be entering the United States in the coming decades. Will the public agencies be able to transform itself to be reflective of this rapidly changing population and the diversity that it all represents? So baby boomers have been retiring now for quite a while. As more and more people retire, the pressure is mounting on these public agencies at all levels to prepare for their anticipated exodus from the workplace that are now serving all of us. Around 21 million individuals are likely to be employed by the federal, state, and local governments. Out of this number, it is estimated that between 50 to 60% are age 45 or older. In other words, those individuals who are 40 and above are considered older workers, but these individuals are 45 and older. So that means more of them will be financially stable and able and eligible to retire as the time comes or as they wish. At the federal government level, the General Accounting Office estimate that about 71% of the senior executive service personnel will be eligible to retire, or many of them have already been eligible to retire and have retired. So this figure translates into a retirement rate that is 20% higher than the previous decades in the United States. So the more people are retired, the more we have to find out ways of keeping the knowledge from retiring with them. With regards to immigration, so if we go back in the last century, we noticed that many people had come from European nations into the United States, where the cultures were perhaps very similar, despite the fact that we have technology that is keeping everybody around the globe updated with regards to the latest trends. There's still going to be cultural differences when people are coming from countries that speak different languages, have different religious philosophies, and different cultural norms as well. Some of the immigrants coming to the United States over the last couple of decades seem to be a majority from places like Mexico, India, China, Philippines, Vietnam, El Salvador, Cuba, Haiti, as well as other places which are near us, like Canada. Over the last few years, although we're seeing a lot more people obviously coming in from places like Afghanistan, war-torn environment, Iraq, Ukraine, Syria, and obviously Russia as well. The success of a public sector in absorbing women and minorities will be challenged in future years by the need to absorb a rising tide of immigrants to the United States. So think about the hundreds of thousands of people that have come from Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, Afghanistan, just in the last 4 or 5 years. The Center for Immigration Studies estimates that immigration will account for about 63% of the American population growth over the next 50 years. 63% of the US population growth. That's a huge number and will mean a lot of changes regarding the diversity of the workplace. Immigrants who come to this country between now and 2050 will add the equivalent of a combined current population of California, Texas, and New York to the United States over the next 50 years. So that's a huge number of people that will be added to our population over the coming years. Gender-based job segregation is still a fact of life in the public sector. So if you look at, for example, street workers are more often men than women, while human resource departments often are staffed predominantly by women. But nonetheless, obviously, regardless of your gender, you're likely to go into professions that you desire and that pays you based on your expectations. So the question to be answered can be, is this gender-based occupational segregation connected to the policy functions of the government or to other reasons, perhaps? So immigration and gender disparity are not just challenges and issues and opportunities here for us as Americans. It's actually something that the world leaders are thinking about as well. As a matter of fact, the Commissioner for the Public Employment Supported Material of South Australia noted that diversity data provides valuable information for the development of government employment agencies and service arrangements. The establishment of a comprehensive data set on the characteristics of the workforce tends to enable a more responsive employment framework to be developed and targeted strategies to be identified. They further noted that the project outcomes are essential to achieving a consistent, longitudinal approach to collecting and managing diversity data across the South Australian public sector. When it comes to keeping and measuring data, the establishing of benchmarks and then monitoring of progress toward achieving those benchmarks is a very important step, perhaps the initial one, to ensure a diverse public employment workforce. Some of the types of data that should be collected and shared by governments can be related to age of employees by range, their gender or sex of the employees, educational achievements by various categories, ethnicity of the employees by general categories, experience in public administration, or even outside of the government sector. General background could be very relevant, tenure of the employee with the agency, and also if the employee has a disability or not, and if the employee is multilingual, perhaps. So these are some basic materials, perhaps, that can be significant when it comes to the government sector in terms of employing different individuals from different regions in order to serve different regions around the world, especially when it comes to language and traditional cultural norms. One of the things in this chapter to look at, since all of us are facing an enormous amount of diversity in our teams, in our departments, in our organization, is the concept of professionalism being the bridge to harmony. Just like private sector, public sector officials and managers face complex challenges when it comes to the behavior alignment in the workplace, especially when people's personal values are in conflict with that of the institution or the organization. So all professionals need to understand that there can be no question as to the manager's responsibility regarding being fair, diversity awareness, and having personal responsibility, and being culturally competent when it comes to managing a diverse workforce. As a professional manager or an agent of an organization, we must treat people with respect and dignity and ensure that all customers internally as well as externally treat each other with respect and dignity. So the concept of personal responsibility applies to everyone, but more so to managers because they're accountable for the behaviors of their employees in the department as well. So when it comes to professionalism and industry skills, that means that we can provide training and awareness. We can hopefully develop individuals to work in teams synergistically. But all of this also means that sometimes employees' personal values and tendencies might be very different than those of the organizations. In other words, when we work in the workplace, our personal values, when they are in conflict with that of the organization, would create a challenge. So we would use professionalism and industry skills to build a bridge between our personal values and the expectations of the organization. So we need to align our behaviors with that of the organization by being a professional in our field. So that's where professionalism serves as a bridge between your personal inclinations and the expectations of the organization. If we don't align our behaviors with that of the organization, we will not have a job. We will not be happy. Our bosses will not be happy. Our colleagues will not be happy. And it could lead to legal violations in a local city or state or province or a nation. So that's why we need to build a bridge between our own personal values and the expectations of the organization when they are in conflict. But hopefully our values are exactly what the organization values as well. This way, there's no conflict at all. Personal inclinations are responses based on largely personal feelings and values. Professionalism is about having the requisite skills and experience in a particular field or industry or profession. And personal alignment is about adapting our personal behaviors to be compatible with the character and values of the institution or the organization. So when it's not required to change his or her values in the organization, one must always align his or her behavior in the workplace to meet the standards expected by the organization, by the institution, by the agency, by the bosses, and obviously by our profession. So that's why we use professionalism to make sure our behaviors are always in alignment with that of the organization. We're always responsible for how we act, no matter how we feel. As always, remember, it's what's inside the person that makes a difference. So hopefully, our cognitive input supports our feelings in alignment with that input, and also that drives our behaviors in a consistent manner. Again, keep in mind that everybody wants to be who they are. So let your employees be who they are and who they want to be, so long as their personal values are not in conflict with those of the professional values and expectations. As always, remember, through equity and inclusionary practices, we can make diversity an advantage for us, for our teams, and for our institutions or organizations, be they in the public sector or in the private sector. Good luck.